Yeah.
So
That sounds
I've
right.
got this scripty thing here, and we got the summary bio thing. And whilst I could read this out, Peter, why don't you
Hmm.
just introduce yourself?
Okay.
Welcome, Peter. Peter
Hello.
Aziz.
So, my name is Peter Aziz. I'm a shaman. I've been working in shamanism for probably about 50 years or so. I was born into it because it's in my family. I was introduced to yoga when I was 8 and been practicing various shamanic arts since then. I've trained in various forms of shamanism. I've trained in Kahuna. I've trained in Pueblo Indian, in Vodou. And I spent about 20 years training in Javanese Quechuan, which is one of the biggest things I do at a very high level with that one. I've also trained in Egyptian magic, and of course we have my family tradition, which is based on fairy and dragon magic. Those are things I do, but I'm also a physicist.
Now that I think is extremely important because when you say one is a physicist,
Hmm.
that means that you're much more in tune. I mean, for instance, you knew how to switch Sidika's camera from 4:3 to 16:9, which
Mm.
is practically a miracle. But the point is that this is a fairly unique, I'd say this is a very unique situation where we're
Oh,
dealing
yes.
with, for want of a better term, the love and light, touchy feely sort of
Hmm.
things. But you've got, and I want to correct that insofar as you have a lot of people in this movement, so to speak, and it's all touchy feely, and you use all the wrong terms, and
Mm.
it's all sort of lovey lovey and all that. But
Yes.
really, and I know another individual who is very skilled in these kind of works and arts and knowledge. You do need to know what physics is about, and so that's is very important that you are acquainted with physics. So that makes a big deal in terms of the
It's very useful
realities.
to actually keep your feet on the ground, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. Well,
So
also it's very useful to understand the science because there's so much false science out there and people get it all wrong, and most people don't even know that.
well, that's the
It's good to
point.
actually stay on track with the real science.
So this is very important. So continue.
So, basically, yes, physics has been my background, my stabilizing point, which I've spread out. Because actually, I got into the metaphysical side because I was actually studying physics, basically. I was actually trying to study gravitational radiation, and I chanced across some very psychic phenomenon which could actually be explained through this kind of this gravitational radiation. So I brought
Now,
it all together to
what's
understand
what's
energies.
what's recreational radiation?
Gravitational radiation.
Gravitational. Okay.
Basically, any moving mass will produce vibration, just as light is electromagnetic vibration. Big bodies like rotating black holes and things produce this kind of gravitational wave which can be detected. And it's explained. It teaches us about the nature of space-time in general and how everything works. So that's been my opening point, where I've got into some very interesting areas, starting with that. And that's when I realised that the result in metaphysics is really real, but hasn't been explained.
Well, I think as an engineer, one of the things that we are taught one of the things we're taught at school is x y coordinates, and then we have x y z coordinates, and then
Yeah.
j terms in equations.
Yes.
And it's explained. Well, this stuff doesn't exist at all, but it's convenient to explain how you tune in a transistor radio,
Right.
because you
Yes.
get your non-real terms to match into a real world, and of course they are real because obviously they must work because they're producing you the
Exactly.
ability to tune into a radio. And for people who haven't a clue what we're talking about, you have all the radio waves are all there, but the point about a radio is that it is able to select one, which means you can listen to it. And in order to do that, you've got to have these J term mathematical equation things, which aren't real. But if they weren't real, and if you wanted to make your electricity meter go backwards, you could mess around with your J terms, your unreal terms in your electricity bill or your electricity, and that would mean you wouldn't get charged a lot. So these are real things, and we just pretend that are in the so-called non-real world, but they are
Exactly.
real, and that's the
Mm.
point about what you're saying.
They have to be. Yeah. They can't be measured in three-dimensional space, but they have to exist somewhere. They explain
Exactly.
how everything works in the background.
So the unreal terms or extra dimensional space effects our 3D real space.
Yes.
Okay, continue.
So basically, I've looked at nature of space-time and how energy works and how creation works to understand how everything is created out of thought, expectation, observation. These are the important things which create everything. So it's become very interesting to actually look at this in terms of how the metaphysics explains our process of creation, like through visualization and so on. Because actually, it's the science is proving what the physicists, the magicians said all the way along. This whole world is just an illusion, all created by thought. And so basically, they use the physics to actually show this, that there's waves until you observe them, they become particles because they become localized in space. Until then, they're just waves. Particles are just a spin in space-time anyway.
But
There's no real mass in
mentioned
anything.
you've mentioned another very important thing. We observe them, and that's crucial.
Yeah, exactly.
So if I
All
said
that actually creates a
collapsing,
reality.
if I said collapsing the quantum wave function, would that mean anything?
Oh, yeah. Quantum
Okay.
wave function, the whole quantum wave equation as a point is constantly developing. I was actually using it to actually create my sonic instruments, and I've actually ended up solving the quantum equation up to 1600 pages, and it still doesn't stop. So it's an ongoing work, that one. Very complex and very mathematical. And so, yeah, you can do all kinds of interesting things with it.
Well, this is really basically you're messing about with, or you're explaining what some people call complex number space. Maybe I should have used that term before.
Okay,
Complex
yeah.
numbers. I've got a real term and an unreal term.
That's right, and we use imaginary numbers and all sorts of things.
So continue, and I'm not going to interrupt anymore. I'm going to let you speak.
Okay.
I'm going to say nothing now. Okay, continue.
So anyway, that's the background of how it all works. What I've actually been doing is trying to create something practical out of it, which people don't understand all the physics of it to use it. And that's where my own range of Psionics has come in. I've created instruments based on my solving of the quantum equation and my linking to nature, space, time, and creation of the universe and everything to actually tap into a power source that can actually change reality in according to our will. Basically, it's magic. I'm actually using physics with magic here. And so I've created my own range of sonic instruments, which actually uses various kind of old magical techniques, such as creating what they call tulpas, which is a kind of a Tibetan way of creating a servitor, a thought form, which you can do things, and how to make these multiply themselves so you can pass them on. So it's an interesting kind of combination of magic and science. And basically, through the quantum physics, I've seen that it does explain the magic too.
But I think when you're talking about science, you were talking about creating thought forms and stuff there, but that's the whole point of when they get everybody to do one thing, such as go out during the COVID era and all clap at 8 o'clock at night on a Thursday. They were doing something there, and the same way when we have the Eurovision Song Contest, and recently we had the BBC's Children in Need event, where they're manipulating the public to do certain things which they may not wish to intend.
Oh, yeah. Well, when you look at physics, there's a lot which is actually invented by the human mind, and then it suddenly gets there. Like quarks, for instance. These were created as mathematical convenience because them trying to solve the wave equation, say, of a proton, where actually 3 separate waveforms, they're called them quarks. Once they're invented, they actually observed them. Same with tachyons. There's a hypothetical particle that travels faster than light. Now you can measure them and create them and so on. These are all creations of the mind, but as soon as we create it, it exists. That's the interesting thing. The physics is actually doing what the kind of metaphysicians are trying to do.
I think there's two fundamental physics experiments here. One is Young's split beam experiment, where you observe the photon, or you observe the wave. Is it a wave or a particle? And the other one is this thing where poor pussycat's in a box.
Oh, yeah, the Schrödinger cat.
Schrödinger's cat. Is the cat alive or dead? And the point is, that's when philosophy and physics and science are sort of all wrapped up into one. So really, they're all the same thing, really.
Yeah. So with the Schrödinger's cat, you can't actually measure it whether it's alive or dead.
But that's one of the whole points.
It's neither. Yeah. But with a kind of double beam experiment, at least you could. Once you put the camera on it to measure it, it was then became a particle. Before that, it was a wave. So that one experiment was very practical because it shows you that observation turns a wave into a particle.
Or we've still got the models wrong.
Possibly too, because it's all based on the picture we put together in our mind. Then we use that to explain everything.
And that's when physics go from solid billiard balls to other things, where the atom
To
isn't a
waves,
single
yeah.
thing, and it's
We go into
all
waves
down to
rather
waves,
than,
wavefront
yep,
energy functions.
exactly. Which is the same about healing. It's all about energy. They're particularly found in the Chinese medicine. They're far more interested in energy than anything physical. They see the plants, the herbs, the body, everything in terms of energy. And it changes how they do things and what is possible with it. Like one thing was a very good eye-opener for me. I was working with a Shaolin monk many years back, and he could actually take somebody's arm and if it was too short, he would actually whoop his energy along and make it a bit longer to actually make them the same size and things like that. Because here it's all energy. You can stretch energy, so why shouldn't you stretch the body, which is energy? When the Western mind thinks, no, this is physical, that can't happen. But actually, because his mind wasn't limited that way, he could do it.
And then we have, yes, one of the key things about this is we have some people call it Einsteinian physics and non-Einsteinian physics.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where basically Einstein didn't really discover what he said it did. He's discovered. His relativity was a special theory of relativity, but there are other sciences where they don't limit themselves to Einstein, which is why they're able to do a hell of a lot of things which you're not allowed to do, like free energy and other things like that.
Of course. And there's many scientists have gone beyond Einstein and had their own kind of expansions of relativity and different things
have a
with it.
spacecraft going intergalactic through wormhole tunnel things and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, that kind of thing. I mean, that's in theory, but it's that's now an engineering problem.
But yes, how do you make it?
Yeah, exactly. The theory is there, but actually engineering it is going to be the next step.
And there are some people who say they have engineered it and they've gone to a galaxy far, far away. But that's another
problem with that is that very little time passes for them, but by the time they come back, millions of years could have passed, so we won't see them for a long time.
And that's the trouble. Well,
exactly. There's a difference of time as well.
And I'm actually I'm wearing a crop circle T-shirt here. And only because we're in Wiltshire here, and I'm wearing a crop circle T-shirt, and a lot of this is actually very complicated, even if they are made by people with boards.
Yeah,
and that's an observation experiment in itself. Who sees what in a crop circle?
Yes, and also the effect of that crop circle when you start measuring energy and see what it's done to the kind of cellular structure of the wheat and that's going in and things like that.
So, and even though somebody went in there and made it, and they have space-time continuous problems, even
exactly,
they've needed dry weather to do the crop circle, and it's pouring rain, but where they're making the crop circle, it's bone dry, and they don't know how that works. Anyway, that extends things to another discussion. I'm fascinated by what you have to say, and I'm also fascinated by the different names that you used for the different belief systems. I'm really interested in exploring all those types of different things and how they relate with each other.
Well, it's just different language, really. When it comes down to it, and if you take out the jargon out, it's all the same. They're all saying the same thing in different language. I mean, what I've got out of this basically is that yes, we create our reality. It's all illusion. We create it. Observation and expectation, the main forces which actually shape our reality. And science has proven that.
And nefarious people would use that technique to create a reality which would suit them and not necessarily suit us.
Exactly. But here's a point they're missing. We all live in slightly different realities. We all create our own reality, which doesn't affect anybody else. Like living in reality here.
I would describe that as if you put an orange in front of people, right? This is my personal observation. If you put an orange in front of 5 people or 6 people or a lot of people, everybody will see an orange, right? And for instance, 2 or 3 of them are colorblind. They will see the orange, and what they call orange is colored by their lack of red in their eyesight. But it's still orange to them. So when you say, could you please pass me the orange, the colorblind person will pass you an orange, and it's the same color. It's just that his perception of the color is different to the other. But everybody will still see orange. But
Well, yes, that's the
according
name
to
they've
their
given to
own
that
individual
object.
perception.
Well, they've given that name so everybody knows what that name is in their reality. So, you know, they might see a different thing from another person, but that's called an orange. And so when you say orange, that's what he'll pass you. The other person will pass the same object, but see it differently.
Exactly. And one person might see a sort of a fruit thing. I'm going to extend this a bit further. But another person might see a swirling mass of tentacles and or something like that or whatever. And, and I'm extent. But that's these are very, very important concepts. So continue.
Yeah. So basically, this is interesting. You talk about crop circles. That's very similar to what I do in my Psionics, finding how symbols, when drawn, will affect the whole energy and therefore affect reality. The trick is to find the right symbols to get what you want. And there are ways of doing that through dowsing and creating certain patterns and based on the circuitry you're creating. But all my psionic talismans are based on simple symbols which actually have an effect this way, just the way crop circles do. Yes, and I'm making those. It's not some mystical thing appearing out of the universe. I've made it, but it still has an effect. And the thing is, anybody who then copies the same symbol, if they exact copy, they'll have exactly the same effect. So once I've charged the symbol with any particular energy, anybody who has a copy of that symbol will get the same effect that I've created it with it. So they can all kind of get a free ride of it, basically, and you have to get them all the magic out of a symbol they've copied.
Which is, of course, why certain crop circles were made the way they were made.
Yeah. Some seem to be having very interesting effects and positive ones. Others seem to be created by an energy change that was already happening. There was a time, for instance, exactly when, so many years back, I remember when I was actually following the dragon line, the ley line across England. And there was a point where suddenly all the energy changed, and doubting the patterns at each power point, the symbol changed, or structure of the energy pattern changed all at once. That's about the time certain crop circles appearing. It's almost like energy changed, and that produced the crop circles. They're a measure of an earth energy that happened to be changing anyway.
Because we have a lot of fields here and they're very increasingly under attack by the government with crops and things like that. But there's a heck of a lot of crops in the east of the country, you know, Norfolk and Suffolk and places, around there. But there aren't any crop circles.
No, they seem to happen in certain places. Wiltshire seems to be a popular place for them.
And there's no coincidence that we have Stonehenge just down the road here.
Yep, exactly. So all these things, there's ancient energies, there's ley line corset, and the middle of the ley line energy is strong, and things happen. So I'm thinking it's actually to do with earth energies creating the patterns themselves. People might make them, might be drawn to walk in a certain way, or maybe energy itself makes them.
Well, why were these stones put in different places rather than other places?
They were marking ley lines. The earth energy would exist along these ley lines, which then has its like acupuncture points along it, a bit like our meridians in acupuncture. And so they were marking them because they wanted to use them. Marking stones along a ley line helps channel the energy so they can actually make the land more fertile and that kind of thing, because that's what they need to do. They need to grow their food. They want to make sure everything is fertile. They could affect the weather, affect the growth of things, where basically actually control the life force for growth, for healing, for growing food, all those things.
Some people call that psychotronics.
You can call it that, but they probably didn't call it back then.
In the United States, I think you're banned from using certain terms because it's a non-word. Like you're not allowed to use the word orgon, I think.
Oh yeah, well, people do.
The Department of Energy in the United States will ban you if you use orgon, the term, because it's Wilhelm Reich's material.
Yeah, but people use it anyway, and they're getting something out of it.
So you have got a healing practice, and you're also a homeopath, and you talking about, I think you mentioned body electronics, Javanese magic, Egyptian magic with a K. Tell us the difference between magic with a K and magic without a K, voodoo with a U, and Aghori Tantra. There's lots of stuff there. So I mean, a whole list of this. So let's go through it.
Okay, continue. Well, first of all, magic with a K is simply to distinguish from stage magic, which is spelled just with a C. So people talk about, when they talk about real magic, they're actually trying to shape your reality. They put a K in it just so you know the difference. We're not talking about stage tricks. We're talking about actually creating a reality. It's another form of stage trick as well, because it's all illusion, but it's still, we actually try and do something real with it. So that's why it's spelled with a K, is to separate it from the stage magic. So, all these things, yes. Voodoo, the spelling Vodou is actually the Haitian spelling. The the usual other way, Voodoo, is the more the New Orleans spelling. So it's in Haiti, I did my nation there, so that's why I spell it that way. It's Haitian Voodoo. Um, Javanese Magick, yes. I'll tell a little story about how I got to these things. Obviously, I was doing lots of healing. I'd done body electronics with John Ray, and I was doing some pretty good healing with it. With the point holding, you could actually rebuild nerve pathways to paralyze layers of the body, break down the calcium in the spine so you can free it up. So you can actually make some pretty dramatic physical changes. And I was working on some people who had had various accidents and getting them walking again. But one thing which came up, which was really frustrating me, as well as the patient, obviously, was that they had a voodoo curse on them. You could hear something and they have another accident and injure something else. And this, ever since they messed with somebody who was doing voodoo, basically. And I wanted to know how to break this. Well, the point that I was doing was all healing things, but it wasn't stopping that curse. I had to go and explore it. The only way I could do it was actually go to Haiti and learn voodoo myself. Then I could actually break the curse, and of course it made a huge difference. Until you've actually seen it, you don't realise how powerful this can be. This
Now,
person's life's
what
been
is a
messed up.
curse? How does it work? Does it depend on the person who receives the curse to believe in
I
the
know.
magic in the first?
A lot of people don't believe in it, but you go to Haiti and get cursed and horrible things happen to you. I mean, even when I was there, I broke my ankle, and that was the interesting way it happened, because I was actually, it was the second time I was there, and I was going to be leading the dances, which is actually quite a high position. So naturally, somebody else was jealous. I broke my ankle, couldn't lead the dances, and he took over. I was just in territory, so I couldn't win that one, you know. So see, yes, these things affect you. And even though I was protected and so on, it's like, you know, this other person was a bit in a more powerful position than me. And many people go there without any believing these things, but once they get cursed, horrible things happen to them. So it does affect people. It's not just in their belief. There's some real powers going behind it. And it's very primitive. You do the basic rituals and light candles and sacrifice something and use certain herbs and do your chants and things happen.
And is it to do with the animal and the energy fields of those animals and the contribution from the plants and what they represent, or what's the engineering side of that?
Well, the animal sacrifice is simply a way of feeding the spirit, what we call the Loa. They have many of these spirits in their kind of religion, which they call for different purposes, and they need feeding. You know, you give them something and they give you something back. It's simple, you know, you scratch my back, I scratch yours kind of
It's
relationship with
important
them.
to have an energy exchange, a
Yeah,
balanced energy
exactly.
exchange.
Exactly. Well, herbs are different. They see there's this one spirit called Granbois, the god of the forest, who contains the magic of all the herbs. You can actually awaken the magic of each plant, because they say every plant has his secret magic in it, and you need to know how to bring those out. So different plants add power to different spells. So basically, you through sacrifice to the spirit to feed it, you use various plants to hold the magic, and you do your spell, and things happen.
Continue.
So there was nothing scientific about that one. My physics didn't explain that one, but there it was, it worked. So I had to kind of expand my view of the universe with that one, of course. That obviously there are these spirits which can do things, and why not? What makes you think we are alone? What makes you think we create it all? There are many
Now,
things out there we don't see.
are we talking about the lower astral or complex number space life forms or whatever?
Well, we're talking about more astral because these are non-physical beings, but say with a lower or higher, it's like, well, that's just our measurement of it. It's like, how do we judge? These beings are powerful. They affect our reality and make things happen. Some seem pretty primitive. They do. Some are more aggressive. Some are actually more spiritual and can create enlightenment and awakening and give you more clairvoyance and visions and so on. So you have the different spirits in the hierarchy. You have what they call the Vada, which is the spiritual ones, and Petra, which are the earthly aggressive ones. So there are different levels of spirits. But basically, there's spirit for everything. Whatever you want to achieve, there's a spirit for it.
So, are we talking Fae or the Jinn, or are these different?
It's neither. They call them Loa. How they relate to Jinn, well, it's different from Jinn because they do talk about Jinn in Voodoo, but they're separate from Loa. Loa are almost like they're gods. They don't call them gods. They, like in Christianity, they have one god they call Bon Dieu, but below they have the Loa. I guess you'd equate them towards angels because these are the things who actually do the work.
And my understanding is with the Jinn, they were energetic beings who lived on the earth before we, made of mud, arrived, because we're physical. And the Jinn are like a civilization, a complete civilization The only understanding I have of this is from a lady called Rosemary Ellen Guiley, who wrote a couple of books in English on that.
Hmm.
And I'm actually, I think I'm in one of them. She's not with us anymore, but is it the difference between, I mean, the jinn, the genie, stuff like that is in from the Eastern cultures, Eastern Europe,
It is,
but
exactly. It is
we
very
have
much
our
Eastern.
lot here in the sort of Western Europe. But I mean, there was a mild incentive not to deal with that by burning people at the stake and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Well, thing about jinn, it seems to be simply their word for spirit. Because when you look at the different types of jinn they have, there's jinn of all kinds. Like the ghoul jinn, the ones who live in the grave and work with the dead, so the spirits of the dead are also jinn. And so, yeah, there seem to be different jinn. And they talk about when you go to your own land, you talk to the jinn there as well, which means that basically we have jinn as well. It seems to me that they simply call spirits jinn. That's the name for it. It could be many things. So all the kind of Eastern magic talk about jinn, there's many, many kinds of jinn. And just like with their other Western forms of magic, they work with four elements. You have the guardians of the air, fire, water, and earth. They get different type of jinn for those as well. So they have a similar structure of magic, just different names.
So this is the way that's evolved in their cultures, and they've been working with that for millennia.
Exactly. Yes. And the way voodoo started, we had vision of this when we go through initiation, actually. You can see where it all started. They start dancing and drumming one day, and the spirit takes over and starts doing healing through a person. And then the chief says, do that again. And they start learning that way, happen spontaneously. The spirits come in and teach them. When they get dancing and drumming, they get possessed, and spirits come in and talk, and that's how they learn. So it's all come from very basic, direct learning from the spirits.
Now, what do the drums do? Because there's a lot, the deep drums, rapid drums.
There's a mixture. They usually have several drums. I mean, they can be any number. It can be 3, 4, 6. When I was actually doing my initiation there were 6 drums, all slightly different sizes, and each person's drumming has a slightly different rhythm. Yet they work together to create this amazing kind of tapestry of sound. And when you're in there in front of the drums dancing, the sound is going through you. It takes you somewhere. Basically, you get possessed by the spirits, and they come through you. They dance you. You suddenly find yourself moving by yourself without knowing what you're doing, and the spirits take over. So the whole sound of a drum is a way of putting you into a kind of trance state where you're being open to something, and it changes you.
So, for instance, I mean, I'm thinking in Northern Ireland they have the lambeg drum, big drum. Is that the same as beating to shatter, provide acoustic waves or longitudinal waves to shatter anything around that might be there?
It wasn't like that. No, they weren't that big. I mean, the drums were kind of sort of things you sit in front of, maybe so high, some a bit smaller. So there would be 6 different drums and people sitting there playing them,
But
and it's
that's
simple.
by being played by your hands. Is that committing an energy wave from your energy field into the drum for other?
There's that too. You see the drummer and the drum both important. Not only you can play the drum, all the drummers who play them are also kind of hungans, they're initiates. They work the spirits. But the drums too, they say that the spirits live inside them. So when you play the drums, the spirits come out and play. So both the drum and the drummer are both important parts of the equation.
Well, I understand that if you have a wind instrument, you can capture a jinn in the wind instrument.
Exactly.
And when
Yeah.
you open the music, the jinn will be released.
Yeah.
And that's why when
Same
you
with the
then
drums.
play
Yes.
the flutes and stuff, you are manipulating the jinn in the wind instrument.
Same with the drums. So
Thus,
when they play the drum, the spirits
snake
come out of the drum.
and certain tones.
Well, they say that each drum only has a certain rhythm when you've got 6 drums and then you've got 6 different sounds and different rhythms played amongst them.
And then
Of course, you
how
have
they
what called the axle.
mix is how the drum,
Yeah.
how the
It's a combination with 6 drummers working together in a pattern. It's like they just create this tapestry of sound between them, and it just creates this amazing atmosphere. Find good drummers is a very special thing. Every time a voodoo group is getting together, they've got to have drummers, and the drummers might go to different voodoo groups to do the drumming because they're a very special skill. Good drummers are very important in voodoo.
So notice at certain conferences people bring drums in, and I'm not entirely sure whether that's a good thing or a bad thing when they're doing that.
Well, these voodoo drums are very specific. These drums are charged, the spirits live in them. The drummers are initiates, they know what they're doing, and they have a connection to the drum and to the spirits within them. Anybody else playing a drum isn't going to have the same effect.
So it's a bit like having a dog or something. You have a being you're nurturing in some way.
exactly. So it's your friend. It'll respond to you. It's not going to respond the same way to somebody else.
Because I noticed that there's some instrumentation that can be used. I've got things to detect alien implants, and I seem to be able to use that thing. But anybody else who uses the same meter, it doesn't work.
Yeah, you develop a relationship to it. That's the important thing with everything we use in magic and also in the Psionics. It's your relationship to it, your level of belief, your energy. It's you who's doing it, not just the instrument.
Fascinating. Continue. When we said
So
we just
the
said
other
that,
thing,
my monitor went a little bit flickery. That's why I have to sort of keep a wee look at things.
yeah. Of course, the other thing we use is the rattle, what I call the asson. I've got one over here. Just grab this a moment.
Yeah.
The asson. So it also has a little bell on it. So when you shake this, you do it in a circular fashion. Get a little bell ringing, and we use this to call the spirits too. So you start with the drums, and then you have the person called the Hugenigon who used the rattle to actually call the spirits into a person to get them possessed. So we're all dancing by the drums, and then somebody will use the rattle over some people to actually direct the spirits. So we use the asson very much in voodoo to actually call the spirits in. When you're on your own, you mainly use the asson because you haven't got the drummers with you necessarily. So at home, this is the main instrument.
And what does it do? How does that work?
Again, it's all made in a very special way. I had to make this myself during the initiation. Each bead is certain colours represent different spirits I work with. So when as I'm actually making the asson, I'm actually feeding spirits at the same time. So they're called into the beads. So therefore, this is charged with the spirits that I'm working with. So each Humgun will actually work with certain spirits. You can't necessarily work with all because there's loads of them, but there's different levels we work with. See, there's 3 grades in voodoo. On the first level, you only have 1 spirit, what's called your metaphysical, the rule of your head. The second level, you have 3. On the third level of Aghori, you have 7. So basically, I've got 7 spirits attached to this rattle that I can call in.
Are you using what do you call them? Numbers, a particular order of numbers, Fibonacci series numbers?
Not exactly. It's not Fibonacci series, but there are certain number patterns in how many beads you put in each level.
That's to do with resonance.
Yeah. It's all about resonance. Because you look at magic or voodoo, particularly, it's all about vibration. You've got drums, you've got numbers, patterns, colours. It's all resonance. So when you're dancing, you're having certain numbers of things and certain colours and rhythms. It's like you're creating a resonant pattern for something to happen.
So one of the things I mentioned, Radio Caroline here, it's just behind my shoulder here. And one of the things that I found that they were doing a long time ago was the use of amplitude modulated broadcasting was a way I found out that was telepathic. So amplitude modulated waves, a big fat transmitter with a carrier wave, the thoughts. I was picking up, and this is one of the tests, I think, when the DJ was cueing the next record and he's listening to it, that would be picked up over the radio, while the the main disc is playing, he's thinking about the next disc, and you would know what the next disc was.
Right.
Which is why the BBC kept Radio 1 on AM for so long, amplitude modulated waves. But also something I found on the BBC, that when they playing old rock and roll records, the backbeat they've changed the backbeat. So they've shifted the beat, they've changed something in that. And something, if you're in the music industry, if you want to get a hit record, you will not be allowed to have a hit record unless your music, whatever you've done, goes through, I think, 1 of 2 production houses in London, and they put stuff onto that, and they won't be allowed to play that. Which is why there was such a hostility against pirate radio, because they were deprogramming the stuff that they were putting out.
Yes, of course.
And I find that it was very interesting that the British government didn't want to touch Radio Caroline. They had to get the Dutch to do it.
Right, it's an interesting one.
And the Prime Minister who committed that, who caused the raid, was Mrs. Thatcher. And she dropped from power very soon after that. That's just... So this is very,
some
very
interesting forces there. It also reminds me of something when I was doing the work with the Hunas with the cranial work, behind a tiny little bone behind the jaw called the hamulus. pterygoid amulus, and when it's actually structured right, this is what we pick up messages with. When I first had my cranial work done and this little bone was realigned, when I got home, first of all, I kept picking up radio stations or picking up people's conversations on the road and gradually tuned into something more useful where I could actually listen to my spirit guides and so on. So you can see these things are all related. These little, we have the structure inside ourselves to actually pick up messages this way. So you can see there is a
is
kind
that
of
in the ear?
easy.
Where is it?
It's actually behind. It's actually inside the head, behind the jawbone. So if you go right inside the mouth, it's like behind the jawbone somewhere up here.
Right.
There's a tiny little bone hidden away called the pterygoid hamulus. Tiny little thin bone. And that actually acts as an antenna. And it's interesting because when we did the work with this, that's when I realised that you could actually, there was a fine line between picking up sounds and radios and actually thoughts.
Okay, go into that. This is fascinating. I remember an episode of The Man from U.N.C.L.E. where the agent had a tooth and it was going wrong, and she could pick up radio waves on a tooth.
It is very close to the teeth. It's just behind the wisdom teeth, you see. And in most people, it's damaged through dental work. That's why it's not working. But when we actually healed this bone and it's structured properly, that's when we pick things up. So it's interesting that it would be related to the kind of back teeth. It's very close. It's not the tooth that does it. It's a little bone behind the teeth.
That actually brings in a little dental work that I think I had unnecessarily using, and they injected the new types of anesthetic, which apparently have got little things in them.
Oh, yeah, they do.
Yeah, and that's
dental work is one way of actually putting the crystals in the needle and putting into people. It's the main way implants are done these days.
Go into that. Continue.
Well, basically, it's like there's been all this mind control stuff trying to get the implants to everybody, and for a long time, one of the ways through dentistry, dentists paid to actually have these little crystal chips into needles that could have, so if they give you an anesthetic, you put a needle chip inside the body. That's not needed so much anymore because a lot of the modern crystals are self-assembling. They're spreading the chemtrails, and then all the kind of 5G and everything else going around is then causing these chemicals to assemble this little crystal inside the body. So it's all done inside. You don't have to actually implant the crystal anymore. These chemicals are everywhere, and electromagnetic fields are helping to assemble them. So the crystal implants are being spread everywhere. It was done through dental injections for a long time, but that's not no longer necessary. They've got more technology now.
That is fascinating to say. So, now, who do you think would do a thing like that? We're leaping subjects here, but who would want to do a thing like that?
Anybody wants control. Now, it's interesting that I don't know about all the technologies, but there's a certain one that was found was actually passed by the Pentagon. That's creating what they call the fanvax, which is actually meant to switch people's psychic abilities off, shut them away from God, basically, stop the religious kind of enthusiasm and so on. Whenever somebody images further, certain parts of the brain are lit up, and they actually found ways of suppressing that, and this is what the vaccine was for.
There is that famous YouTube video with Bill Gates talking about that to the CIA.
Yeah. And basically, yes, this was actually funded by the Pentagon. So you see all these big governments after control of the people.
We have to make it very clear that Pentagon and the CIA are not best buddies, even though they're meant to be on the same side.
No, they're different people competing for power, basically.
Continue. This is very important. I mean, at this stage, we're sort of introducing these subjects. So we'd like to really go and dig down into that subsequently. But we're a free format here, so keep on going.
Yeah. So basically, yes, the whole mind control thing, it's got more and more subtle. Because at first it used to be like most of these were crystal implants and electronic implants. Now they're organic. Gene sequencing. There's basically 4 different proteins they use to actually, in certain sequences, can actually change the DNA. And the mRNA vaccine was actually part of this, how it worked as well. You can actually put these certain proteins together and use certain frequencies and so on, certain high frequencies to actually shape them, to actually shape the DNA. This is how gene manipulation was done. So what the implants are putting in are not actually chips anymore. They're actually direct changes to DNA. They're these kind of protein strands being put together, controlled by frequencies. So this is how the modern implants are done. It's no longer even electronic or crystal chips, it's direct organic ones. These are bonded to your own DNA and making actually changes in your whole body, your thoughts, your nervous system, your thinking, trying to reshape you as to what they want, to think as they want.
As in Borg.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of these things are almost like the ideas that came from fiction. It's like, oh yeah, people trying to do that in real life. It's about controlling people, They want everybody to do as they're told.
And if you can
Everybody to,
control people, then you can control what they create
yeah,
and manifest in
exactly.
reality.
Well, people who are actually controlling people don't actually work on manifestation the way we think, because when you create your own reality, you don't have to make somebody else do it for you. That's actually a waste of energy. It takes far more energy to manipulate people than it does to create it yourself. You see what I mean? So those who actually work in control are not understanding our way of manifestation. This is actually where they're lacking. This is where their weakness is. You see, all this implants being that even the organic ones could be changed by frequencies, because that's how they assemble them. If frequencies are used to actually cause the change to build in a certain format, frequencies can be used to dismantle that, to help the body return to what it should be. And the thing is, we don't even have to know what frequencies they used. The brain can be triggered to produce frequencies to do the job if you give it the right trigger. Now, brains are amazing instruments of what they can generate. Just like a computer can generate any frequency you like if you program it, the brain can do that too. If you actually put the instruction in that you've got this implant, this kind of RNA that's been messed up, and want to change that, you can get the brain to produce the frequency it needs to actually deconstruct that. That's one of the things to do with the Psionics. The powerful thing about Psionics is that it's you who's doing it. Our brains, our bodies, nature itself is so amazing at what it can do. We need to give it the right little triggers.
Well, let's go into that. I had a chat with a couple of people who've been talking about psionics. It's one of the phrases they use in the full disclosure movement, about where they want full disclosure. And they use the term psionics a lot. And I'm very interested in what you mean by all that. Explain that whole thing.
It's a big thing these days. We're all using it. I mean, interesting, because I first found out it was being used when I was actually on a train to London, back when I was back there in those days. And just in front of me were a couple of policemen on the way to a mind warfare training. And I heard them talking all about it, what they were going to get. They all get a specialist computer. It costs $500,000 to trade each one of them. They get a specialist computer with the software of Psionics in it to basically to affect people and control them. And that's when I figured out they were talking to people like me. So it was a good warning for me of what was coming.
Maybe you'd been so-called guided to be there to hear that.
Obviously, yes, because they were right in front of me, and I could hear the whole conversation. So I went home and started thinking about it and started making my own little plans to actually counter it.
Okay, explain all that in detail, and I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to say nothing for the next 15 minutes, so take it away.
Okay. I'll talk about the nature of Psionics then. It actually comes from the older science of Radionics, which often used to be made in healing and dowsing and so on. Now, I first came across this back in my college days. I was doing physics, of course, but I used to like to go to some of these mind, body, spirit festivals and see what was going on there, and looked to dows, but also had these Radionic machines they used in healing. Of course, being a physicist, I had to open up and see how it worked. What I found is practically nothing inside it. Many of the dials weren't even connected to anything. It was all a focus for the mind. Now, when I showed this to some people who used the machine, suddenly they didn't work anymore. On the other hand, other people realized they don't need the machine. It was them doing it all along. So you see, it's all down to belief. And before I got into the actual creating these sonic machines and things, I also got into dowsing. And again, I saw the effect of belief here. At one dowsing conference there was one dowser who said he could neutralize an underground stream so nobody could find it. So none of the dowsers could actually find the stream, apart from somebody coming in late and didn't hear him say that. Another person said he couldn't douse through metal. So underneath the carpet, up just under half the room, they put aluminium foil. And underneath this, all over the room, they put little coins and got people to douse for them. Only they told the dowser that the metal was under the other half. They couldn't find the coins where they thought the metal was. They could find it where the metal really was. So all these rules are nothing but belief. That's what I found, is belief did it all. And it is, but also when I looked at the machines then, although I said there wasn't much inside, actually what was inside was a symbol drawn on paper and a little crystal and sometimes a copper coil. And I then met another guy in America, a guy called Wendell Hoffman, who was very good with his radionics, created all kinds of wonderful healing instruments, which had very powerful effects. Of course, I had to open up those and find out how they worked. And again, I found a piece of paper inside, symbols drawn, and a little crystal. That's all that was in it. But that was having an effect. And when I looked at into the Psionics more and realized that one of the old instruments, the Hierarchies machine, it was found that it worked even when it was switched off. Then it's found a diagram of it worked as well. Unless one of the lines was broken, if you broke the pattern somehow it wouldn't work. But if you had a diagram of the machine and how it worked, that worked too. It wasn't about machinery, it's all about symbols, and also belief in that. When somebody has a machine and told it works, they can believe in that. As soon as you told them there's nothing in it, suddenly it didn't work. Until those who do used to well realise, okay, it's me doing it all along and I can still do it. You see, belief is a very important part of this. So I found in my psionics, so I don't bother with machines, I simply create the symbol on paper. We can call virtual psionics or paper psionics. You have the symbols drawn up in a special way to create an effect. When people use that, it works. They don't have to understand how. I guess there must be a certain level of belief and to want to use it, and so it works. But actually, it's how the symbol interacts with their brain. When I teach people about dowsing the rates, the frequencies to put the number patterns on the chart, people always worry, well, what if it's wrong? But it can't be wrong. It's your number. Whatever you get is your brain's way of storing this piece of information. This is my program. This is what this one's doing. That's all it is. There is no right and wrong. It is all down to belief, intention, and some kind of symbolism to direct it, and somehow linked to a power source. Some of these machines use things like orgone generators, using the orgone stuff in it, all of that. But that's pretty small when you look at it. When you can actually quantum link to anything in the universe by having a copy of it, you have much greater power source. Like, say, the Great Pyramid. That's one thing I used in my instruments. I went to Egypt. I tuned to the spirits. My partner at the time actually filmed me. Actually, when I was in the temple, you could see all these orbs flowing into me. The spirits do respond to and ask for their help. They're not being used there because it's all tourist now, so come with me and do this work. So I could draw a little piece of symbol in the temple and add all the power of that temple. So in my little piece of paper, I've got all the power of the Great Pyramid. Now, look how big that is, this orgone generator. Probably 1 billion times stronger than these orgone generators you have in the machine. So that's nothing. We can tap into all these great power generators in the world and bring it into a piece of paper. We have all the energy we need to make an effect that we want. All we did then is the symbol which directs it with the intention, and some number we douse for ourselves and come up randomly that will actually hold that program, and we can create what we want. It's that simple, really. It gets more complex because as you go into different programs that want to count some of the negative things in the world, I had to get quite complex with it and come up with various complex symbols to do the job, but they all work. This is counting all the negative psionics that I see these people doing. They're using mind control, blocking people who are raising their head above the line and not doing as they're told, all kinds of nasty things. Well, I can take a piece of paper, draw symbols up and block the whole thing, stop it from happening. And that's something I don't like, so there's a constant battle going on. They pay a lot of money, £500,000 each for these machines, and I'm changing with a piece of paper.
There's a thing about mirrors, and then you've got the term black mirror. When you switch off a TV, a plasma screen or whatever, it's a black mirror.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the ways of disturbing the energy field of the black mirror or a silver mirror is simply put a sticker, or just a little item on the screen, then that produces an interference pattern within that, and it's a bit like having a still pool, and then you just pop and it's the ripple.
Something, it changes it. Yes. One little thing will change the resonance.
And that's what the solar system is. It's a series of resonances, which we then call planets. And each planet's got its own node and musical.
Everything is energy, really. And I said it's like when you have space-time, first there's just waves. When you observe that wave, what you're doing is collapsing energy into a little vortex. And this vortex we call a particle. You look at the nature of particles, you only measure them by spin. That's all they are. Well, it's spinning. Space-time itself is spinning. That's what the particle is.
It spirals.
Everything has a counter movement in a way. You just watch the water going down the plug hole. You see this spiral going one way, and you look at the surface. There's a spin the other way at the same time. Have you ever looked at that?
I'll have to observe that.
Interesting if you just watch water go down the plug hole. You'll see a counter spin.
I remember lots of people in Australia were asked on BBC one Sunday afternoon on a TV show, "Go flush your toilet, and which way does it go?" And they had a camera and all that. But that's how But so there are two counter rotating spins.
Both coexist. If you watch the water going down, spinning one way, on the surface there seems to be a movement the other way, slower. You've got the water going this way, and around it there's ripples going the other way. You have to watch it. If you just
Now,
They're
this is
all together
very
and I've got to
fundamental
watch
to
it.
big physics. I mean, this is what the Glock, the Nazi bell was. They had once people start talking about two counter-rotating energy fields in the same space,
Yes,
pay attention.
everything is.
And they do that with the Glock, which became the Mercury engine, which derived a lot of the triangular so-called UFOs. But they do it with the Hadron Collider.
Exactly.
What would they be doing with that?
Many things. You see that although there was experimenting with particle physics, it's found that this collider is a massive psionic coil as well. It opens dimensional doorways.
Now, this
They
is
can
the
use
point.
that.
I mean, when they're trying to find the God particle, that's just what they're telling us. But what are they really doing? And because
Well,
I'm
God
from
particle,
Belfast,
physics
I'm going to
particle.
say, what are they really, really doing?
Well, they're trying to get the power of God. They're trying to bring in things that will help to control us all again. That's always their motivation. They want power to have control. That's all they ever focus on, it seems. They're obsessed with it. Somebody looking for a God particle, what does it mean? They want God. They want powerful beings to come in and help them. And actually, it brought some nasty things, and they've had to close the project down many times because what was coming was really dangerous. They can't control it. And they're open up to these alien dimensions.
Well, there were various things done by Simon Parks and a number of other people I was interviewing a few years ago that they were trying to put something to interrupt the energy field of the Hadron Collider and make it break down. It's interesting that there were a number of people doing that with intention, and it seemed to work.
It does. As I pointed out, it's like they might make some huge instrument we can change in a very subtle way. Because they're doing things in a very crude way. And what missing the point is that a simple change of resonance with a thought and something really small can change it. There's another example of when I was working on the ley lines many years back. Do you remember when they made this big cutting through Newbridge when people were trying to press because they're cutting trees down and so on? Later when I looked at it, I realised what they'd actually done is moved a power point where the kings used to be crowned, where the 7 ley lines meet up on the hill. They moved it into Winchester College where the masons train. I changed it by putting a little crystal in the earth in the right spot. They had to cut a massive cutting through the earth to do it. And we can change things by plunging crystal in the ley lines, you know. What they do is very crude. There's always a simpler way of actually correcting it. Same way they did this massive collider to try and open a portal. And there were magical ways of doing this, which are more subtle. This is what magic was all about.
But what is their agenda to achieve control? What are they doing that for?
It's a strange one that when people get into control, it all becomes an addiction. They're not happy unless they've got control of everything. This is an ego pattern. When the ego gets carried away, it simply wants to control the whole of reality. You won't go out without every possibility covered to make sure everything's going your way. There's no sense of chaos and unknown or chance. They want control of everything to make sure it's safe for them to get their way.
Order out of chaos.
Yeah, well, basically, we have a concern about chaos in life because there's so many unknowns. This is part of the fun of life. Too much order is boring. There has to be some unknowns out there, some unexpected things. Like receiving is chaos. You don't know whether you've been given something. It's out of chaos. It can be very beautiful. So chaos isn't all bad. But when people want order all the time, they're afraid of the chaos because they're not in control of it. Chaos by its nature is that there are things we're not in control of, but they can be really beautiful too. We like surprises, good surprises. We don't want the bad surprises, but we need some surprises. And there have to be that always unexpected things to learn more and grow and expand and have a certain sense of wonder. When people get caught in ego and need to control everything, the further they go, the more controlling they get because they get more threatened. There's too much working against them because that order is trying to break all the time. And they have to get harder and harder and harder to keep maintaining the order. And therefore we use more and more force all the time.
So laughing at these psychopaths is one way of disrupting it.
Yeah, but also realize that they're caught in ego, getting very forceful, and it's like they're addicted. Addicted to control.
So how we've got some very bad people mucking about in Europe with all those controlling structures and things like that.
Oh yeah.
How would you suggest people fight that? Apart from walking down the street and waving a flag saying, well, I don't agree.
No, that doesn't work. They see where you are then and get you. You want to keep hidden. First thing is, the most physical way is to realise that everything is shadow. everything is a reflection of us. Therefore, we look at our own control mechanisms. Look at the area in ourselves where we need to be control, where we are trying to control others. Deal with that. If we do that, we change the outside as well, because we're changing shadow. See, what you deny into your shadow comes to you from the outside. You change it within, it changes out there too. So the first step, actually, which is actually most important, is for us all to face our own control mechanisms, our own need for control, our own fears of being out of control. If we deal with inside, it changes the world.
Something I've noticed about LED lights, they give a street lighting, they give us a different shadow to a living being than they do to other objects.
Oh, yes.
Now, I don't like that. The shadow that it gives, for instance, if I walk past it, I've got a much more defined shadow. But other objects sitting in the same path of the it's a phased array beam for a start. You've got a lot of that's dangerous.
Yeah.
That's not good. That's what the LED lights are. They're phased arrays.
Yes.
So that's a different kind of light. What do you think they're doing there by creating shadows?
Again, this isn't deliberate. It's just a fact that shows that that our auras, our energy field, our life force does affect light. It doesn't affect most lights, but certain lights, you see it changes the shadow. We see there's something there. It shows that living things do have an energy that's separate from non-living things.
I mean, there's
No,
two different types of light. There's illuminating light, there's incandescent light, and luminous light. I think the kind of light that comes from electric eels and stuff like that, which is why you can't see things as well. I mean, I'm using LED lights here, but if there's a difference that it's difficult to read, for instance.
Oh yeah, it's different. But also, yeah, but obviously they make lights. They're trying to make journeys more cheaply, but obviously that's functional for their normal range. Obviously, when you're reading things, doing fine work, you need different lighting. But the kind of cheap lights you have everywhere these days are actually made to be cheap.
It's
so
a fuzzy
you can
light.
still function them. Yeah, you can function with them, but they're not very good.
And I dispute that they're actually cheaper. I mean, the amount of chemicals you have to put in these things and the power supplies you have to work from, very complicated little power supplies to make all this stuff work.
Yeah.
Street lighting. And it also, those kind of power supplies are radiating lots of different frequencies. In the AM band.
Well, who knows? Because there could be another science we don't even know about, because they could be using and haven't told us about, because obviously frequencies affect us. Light, sound, everything.
I picked up about way back in the early 90s that they were transmitting certain frequencies using beat frequencies. It's a lot of these frequencies aren't the carrier wave. It's when they mix.
Yes.
And I think they were doing work with that in World War II, where it's not the microwave energy that's very high. That's 1,000 hertz, 1,000 gigs or a gigahertz, 1,000 megahertz. It's not the actual carrier wave. It's the beat frequencies between them when they mix.
Oh yeah.
And then that demodulates.
Like oil beats.
Yeah.
That's why you create a certain little package, like in a little beats. But binaural beats they use to actually affect brain frequencies. It's that kind of thing.
I'm going to say that's what they're doing with the windmills. They're putting windmills, tall, low-frequency wobbling items on near ley lines. I mean, for instance, the energy lines coming into Brighton, for instance, they've got a whole array of windmills, which are all going woo woo woo, and then the actual spinning propeller itself is producing hypersonic waves in an array, a phased array. But it was interesting that there was a gap between the ones at Brighton, because there was it's an actual ley line energy wave that comes into Britain at Brighton.
Yes. Yeah.
Colin Bloyd did a lot of stuff on this. But why the gap? Which means that there's definitely something they're doing with there's a choice of where they put these things.
Yes. There'll be like a ley line intersection, a PowerPoint.
It's a low frequency wave. It's a tall mass going like it's moving slightly.
Yeah, as I was pointing out, they use big structures to try and change energy, which we can do with simple little crystals and planted here and there with spells. But it's how they work with the earth energies. They put these massive things on them to try and change them.
And they're not
And
working because they're falling apart, and the people
yeah, they
don't
will
want to.
do.
They don't want to maintain them, and they're
Well, they would fall apart because it's like they're wobbling, and you
yes.
go get earth energy, and there's going to be a lot of wear and tear in it. You see, if you were see, they're not recognizing just how powerful the earth energy is. If you want to tap into that, you're also going against a very powerful current yourself. It's like if you put something in a magnetic field and it swings, you're going to have like a countercurrent created. It's going to break it apart. You can't keep manipulating earth energy. It's going to somehow fight back that way. It's going to create a resistance.
Well, I
It's
think
going
that's what's
to upset the
happening.
machine. Yeah.
And then I mean, you cannot invent. I mean, a friend of mine invented an extremely good windmill, but it was a non-resonant one that sat on the top of your roof. So where you have the top of the roof, and no matter which way the wind blows, it's going to spin this.
Right.
And
Okay. Yeah.
he had it designed so it wouldn't achieve resonance, so you wouldn't hear this sort of whirring sound on your roof and your roof shake apart. And he
Right.
was forbidden to market that in this country. The windmill people says go away, no. And it's a brilliant idea, and it's the actual generators are at each end, but what they seem to be wanting are these vertical posts in the ground, wobbling, and then the spiraling effect, and then the compression effect on the top blade swinging around, and then the stretch effect is disastrous. Well, that's windmills.
Well, I found that myself when I was doing physics. You realise you can only get so far with the truth. If you want truth, you can't be in the system anymore. You can't do it there. You get caught up in a whole pattern with it. All the good inventions don't get taken on.
But they get patented, and so if you try to make them.
Well, to make sure you can't have them, basically. But many things have been created, like free energy. Cars that run on free energy. And they get taken away. Make sure nobody gets them.
So you've got you do a number of programs. Let's get on to we've got a PowerPoint here. Why don't we use the PowerPoint? Let's go on to the PowerPoint.
Okay, let's have a look.
Oh my God, the PowerPoint. So well, we'll put that up, and we'll just see what that's going to do. And we don't want that. Well, let's get that back to you. No, you don't that either. You don't want that. Let's start this. Right. So, okay, we got two PowerPoints here. This is just introducing you. So I'll just hit the right button. So there we are with your wonderful thing. Do you want to explain where that is and what you're doing?
What am I doing there? Oh, that was just taking some pictures. It was actually not far from here on the island, on Kopangang, and went down to the beach, down to the woods. We went out for breakfast there and just do a bit of filming out in the woods. So it's just a typical woodland along near the beach on the island here.
And you are on an island where exactly? Do you want to say?
It's called Kopangang. It's one of the islands in Thailand.
Wonderful. So this is a very complicated thing, and that's your website.
Right. Okay, this coming
which is azizshamanism.com.
Exactly. I just put my name in shamanism so people can easily find me. But basically, this presentation is coming from a little webinar going to be in next weekend, talking about healing the unhealable and also about manifestation.
Now, when we're talking about next weekend, we are talking about the 30th of March,
that's right,
2025, and today's the 24th of March, 2025. So we'll what's involved with all this, and we'll just go through these.
Yeah. This is a bit about what I'll be covering, because I'll be covering the typical health issues people presenting, so I'm helping people to actually.
Can you read those out? Can you see that?
From here. I can't see really well on my screen.
Okay,
it's
we're dealing with homeopathy, acupuncture, kinesiology.
These things I've done. This is about me. The things I've studied. I started out as a scientist, but I studied homeopathy, acupuncture, kinesiology, iridology. Then I trained in Radionics, which is did with the John Ray out on Hawaiian Islands. That was actually a very advanced system of a point holding based on Kahuna work, where you actually use points of the body to actually trigger genetic memories, bring out all the old traumas, not only from yourself but from your parents, grandparents, that's things stored in the genes. So we can bring out all the kind of conditioning, all the patterns that are stored in the DNA that are affecting health. It's a very powerful healing system that's based on actually clearing out all the old traumas out of the system. So that's something I trained with John Ray. Then there are the various forms of magic I've trained in, the Vodou, the Javanese Magick, Egyptian Magick, Fairy and Dragon Magick, Pueblo Indian. Those are all the things I've studied, basically. And so these things I combine in my work, in my healing work.
Excellent. This is a very complicated slide. Now releasing traumas and
Yeah.
past emotions. Do you want to
Yes,
go
this
through
was
that?
talking about the body electronics, how it works. I'll explain that a little bit. What we've got drawn here is a Mobius strip. You know, when you twist a bit of paper back on itself so it has a kind of change. This is actually the shape of the corpus callosum in our brain, the bit between the two hemispheres, which means that when every thought that goes through our brain, goes through a consciousness, goes through a 180 phase change that cancels out the wave that's stored in the DNA. So what this is showing is why memories get stored in the body. If you experience something fully consciously, it's released. Until we've done that, it's stored in the DNA. So all that suppressed traumas and emotions that we have not willing to really feel are still in the DNA. And because there's these 7 coils in the DNA, this also resonates with the 7 endocrine glands. And this basically shows how we suppress emotions. You see, each emotion is linked to a different level of resistance. When you experience life with enthusiasm actually means God in you, so it means the life force is fully present, there's no resistance. Anything less than that, we're resisting. So the first level of resistance is pain. When you feel pain, obviously things not as you want them to be. We have resistance. When we suppress that, we go into anger because you want to force it to change. Then we go into fear because you're afraid it'll never change. Then you go into grief. You almost get fed up with all being that way and you feel the victim. You go into the self-pity and the grief. When you actually give up and can't change it, you go into the apathy. And finally, supposed below consciousness, we're no aware of the pain, you have unconsciousness. So these 7 levels of emotion are stored in the 7 endocrine glands. So basically, unconscious goes to the gonads, apathy to the spleen, grief to the solar plexus, pancreas and adrenal, fear to the thymus, anger to the thyroid, pain to pituitary, enthusiasm in the pineal. So when we actually have any kind of a physical illness, such as, say, something like arthritis is actually affected by the thyroid because that controls calcification. It's because of suppressed anger that's stored there that's affected its functioning. We heal it then by releasing the emotion that's stored there. So body electronics is a system of actually pressing certain points, reflex points, while using certain energy frequencies to actually bring out that stored emotion. So we release it. When it's released in the body heals. Even of these serious conditions like arthritis, cancers, immune problems, they can all be healed by releasing the emotions that are stored there. So that's the kind of basic of the body electronics work.
That is
how it works.
Fascinating. Okay. Anything more here?
That's basically it's showing the infographic there showing how the emotions are stored in the glands. That's sort of explaining that. That's the basic little diagram of how the body stores emotions and how we release them.
Excellent. Moving on. And that's just your logo.
That's me. Yeah, my logo. Yeah.
And we've got a series of lovely images here. Let's explore
this is based
those.
on the flower of life. This one, basically, I used that as one of my symbols in my Psionics to actually create something, but actually really help people change their reality. You see, with this, you can actually connect this to all your own deities, whatever you believe in. And each point in it can actually be a part of what you use to create your reality. Once you actually set this up personally and actually attach your own belief system to it, you have a power structure that can affect your reality. And we then use this to actually create what we want, discreate the kind of problems that get in the way, get rid of all the obstacles to make sure that you can actually get what you want in the end, to make the manifestation much easier, more fluid. So with this, one of the examples of use of how we use sacred geometry and patterns and things to actually affect our reality.
Okay, next.
Kali. I work a lot with Kali, so that's part of one of the things I mentioned. The Aghori path is actually a worship of Kali as
explain all those skulls and heads and things. I mean, what does this mean?
That's what I got
why do they have all those different?
Okay.
Explain that.
Now, Kali is quite a scary image because she's seen as great transformative goddess, the destroyer of all darkness, and she's the one who actually gets you to face your fears, to actually go into your shadow and grow and face yourself and become more. So naturally, she has scary images, but also the skulls she wears. There's 50 of them in a necklace called the Mundamala. These actually represent the 50 Sanskrit letters. They're aspects of consciousness, you see. The Sanskrit language is based on different aspects of mind, consciousness. So they represent each one by a head. So there's 50 heads or 50 skulls, actually they're 50 Sanskrit letters, which are 50 aspects of consciousness. And so he has various weapons because in the story she was created to actually destroy these demons. In this mythology, basically the gods are being overrun by the armies of demons, so they got too strong, and Indra was kicked out of heaven, and they turned to Shiva, and Shiva decided to actually put all his power into the goddess to actually make this kind of new power. So Vishnu, Shiva, Brahma, all the top gods put the power into one, so it's the power of all of them. Then gave her a weapon. So she's got the Khadga, it's her own thing. She chops over to. She has the Shiva's trident. She has Vishnu's. Yes, she has all the combined weapons because she's the one who went out then to destroy the armies of demons to actually free the heavens again and free humanity from their evil. So she was this great destroyer of darkness, a liberator.
Excellent.
So I work with her a lot because we use her to destroy those negative patterns. So we use it on the healing to actually destroy a lot of the implants, the entities, negative patterns, blockages. Very powerful energy if you work with it the right way.
Okay.
Dragons, yes. I work with dragons a lot.
Yes.
It's particularly from the Javanese magic. We work with various kind of animalistic spirits of the land, the jinn, the dragons, various other nature spirits, and the dragons obviously the most powerful guardians. Within the Javanese magic, there have a number of different dragons, which are associated to different mountains and different places in nature, which are guardian spirits, and they all produce certain qualities, spiritual powers, very much for protection, overcoming darkness again, overcoming obstacles, giving invulnerability to any kind of negative energies and attacks, that kind of thing. So dragons are powerful guardians we work with.
And so some people have said that the dragons were real in this world, and then they've gone into a realm others. I mean, we've got the Welsh dragons all over Europe and things.
The way I see it is symbolic. You see, having this lizard breathing fire is a symbol of the risen Kundalini. They see serpent as the Kundalini as a serpent energy, yet it's also the fire. So this fiery serpent is actually the Kundalini rising. And this is actually found in the names of the dragons when you translate them. Like, for instance, in the Javanese system, the first empowerment gives the crown of the dragon is called the Mukutu Nogososro. It means crown of the dragon, but at the same time, it's break the words up. It's about the energy rising to the top of the head, the Kundalini risen. So you see it within the whole kind of structure of this, way it's made, it's symbolic of the Kundalini rising, which is about our power waking up and being enlightened.
Fascinating. This guy looks as if he's had a bad day.
Yeah, the black goo. I used that image when I was to my blog on the black goo. What I found is that although black goo is weaponized, it has a very useful function. It was there for a purpose in the first place. It is part of our interaction with the earth and why we're here and so on. It actually affects our identity, which is why it's been weaponized. You can get people to change their identity with this stuff and therefore make them into what you want.
When the British, I don't like to use that term, but the Falklands War got a lot of the stuff that the Germans had been refining, and they handed it to a lot of scientists, and a lot of them self-terminated because it didn't want to be weaponized.
Yeah, exactly.
That even hit the newspapers.
It has intelligence, you see. It is actually part of the earth, but also the interconnection between the earth and the organic beings living on the earth. It's almost like an interface, and it actually teaches us how to live on the earth. It gives us the identity of actually being earth guardians, for instance, of how to live here properly. So it has a very useful function there. When people weaponize it, it's to change the identity into what they want rather than what's natural for this earth, you see. Okay. So my work was actually to reattune the black goo back to its divine blueprint and bring it back to what it should be. Tune us to the earth again and make us more healthy on this earth and more attuned to it.
That's very interesting. Okay, next.
Chandali.
Now I have to say that this looks like from the Marvel comics, the Marvel comics gods and all that.
That's right, Human Torch. Yeah. But I use that image because this is the work about raising Kundalini. The empowerments do called Chandali. It's a safe way of raising Kundalini step by step, so it's in safer stages rather than burning out completely. So you don't end up looking at that. But however, this represents that Kundalini energy, the fire waking up in the body. This is what produces purification, enlightenment, and cleansing of all the negative energies and so on.
Okay, next.
This is our genie, yep. There's something else I teach on my courses, how to work with the jinn. That's an illustration of a jinn, basically. They don't necessarily look like that, but they might do a little bit. But yes, jinn magic, we spoke about earlier. There are spirits who can help you in various things. They're djinn of
They
different kinds,
consider
different purposes.
themselves, my understanding is they consider themselves to be more superior to us because they can change form, but we can't.
Yeah, there's differences there. At the same time, there's understanding of a co-creation going on, that they need us as we need them. We're meant to work together, and that can be mutually beneficial.
And that
You
goes back to
see,
King Solomon.
oh, we before that. I mean, King Solomon was one person, famous person who worked with the 72 different jinns, but obviously jinn magic was known before him. It's very
Yeah,
old.
obviously.
It's before Islam or Jew or any of the modern religions. There's much older ways of working with jinn. Basically, they was the spirits of the desert that the people worked with, and we taught them magic and helped them to create the life. See, the co-creation is very important. We're not alone in creating the world. Obviously, we create together, we co-create. And knowing who we're co-creating with is therefore very useful. These spirits can help us do it better. What they get out of it is they see an end result. They have all this power but don't do anything in our world. They want to see an end result in the physical world. They need to work with us for that. They like to actually help us create things.
And I think that we've got to do that in a big way right now. We've got to
Well,
unite.
we need to work with them. It's up
Yes,
to us as well. We've got to co-create with them.
absolutely. And then we have this.
That's the DNA, yep. Obviously, I mentioned the work before about how we changed the DNA, how at least thought patterns, that was just an illustration of the DNA, basically. You know, so you have the two strands, and so when the energy wave flows through it, you have two coils, so the wave goes both ways at once, down one coil, up the other. So we have a scalar wave formed, and this is how information is stored.
Could you explain scalar waves to people who misuse the term?
Okay, a scalar wave means it has no direction. You have scalars and you have vectors. Normally, when you make a wave, it moves. If you've got a wave going back, reflecting back, you have a standing wave pattern. It's not going anywhere. It's up and down in the same place. A scalar wave is basically a standing wave. It's not moving like a vector.
Right. Okay.
Okay, fairy. That's another one of the courses I do, teaching people how to work with the fairies. A bit different from jinn, but it's another parallel world, and we need to co-create with those two to understand our whole relationship to the cosmos and how we create and so on.
Otherwise known, some people call them the Fae or
Fae,
the
yep.
She. Is the
She is that was one particular tribe amongst the Fae, but yes, the fairy came from the word Fae, which simply meant special, gifted.
Yeah.
They were seen as people who had the magic, basically.
I believe a friend of mine was taken by them in Ireland, St. Patrick's Chair in Well. He was taken 4 times, as if he walked into a different realm.
Oh yes, I used to do it a lot as well when I was taken.
And we were calling our radio station Kiss FM, and we ended up changing the name to Energy.
Oh well, yeah. But it happens. There are certain places where the veil between the worlds is thinner, and you can cross over, and this is where the fairies come to teach us.
And I understand that the veil, the differences between the veils are getting very close now. Is that right?
Yeah, but there are certain places where they've always been thinner, and these are the places of initiation.
Yeah. Okay. And we got
Ireland
the
is well known
pussycat.
for it,
Now
but
I'm
other
going to
places
say
of the world as
something
well.
here. I have seen a
okay,
number
okay.
of very important people do their webinars.
Yep.
And the 2 people I'm going to use as an example, Simon Parks and Stuart Sverdlow. Are you familiar with Stuart Sverdlow?
I've heard of them, yeah.
And also Simon Parks.
I've heard of them, I don't know much of
Well,
them.
the most important thing is Stuart Sverdlow's going to do this. They have a very, and his wife every week, and they have this little bit of a jovial, highly sarcastic, little bit of a banter. But the cats get involved.
Yep.
They've got big cats, and they walk right across the screen with a bushy tail. You can't see me, but and another one, Simon Parks, had quite a lot of that. And when I'm going to put myself on here, get the right one. We were doing in the Amash project. We had a guy called David Griffin was part of that project about 12 years ago, and we had Joanne Summerscales of Glamorous Joanne Summerscales, and we were talking about this. And I had the black sofa sitting there, and David Griffin was talking about this. This was about the first material on the sentient oil of the black goo. A guy called Alec Newell wrote a book about it, and that was what we were discussing. And of course, we brought in what was in the X-Files and a few other things. But the thing that's important here, we had a ginger tomcat was sitting on the sofa. It had decided to adopt me for about 6 weeks in the summertime, and it sat there during the start of this thing, we're talking about the black goo, and it sort of was sitting there, and then it sort of it had a very sort of meow look about him, meow, really deep wisdom meow, and it decided, oh, I've had enough of this, and got up and left. As if we didn't want to disturb it. You see, it was just. But I think that the cats have got a connection here, and there's something going on that way. And with that, we'll go back to the PowerPoint. But I had to mention that. And here we have, you've got a cat and a whole lot of other very important diagrams there. So I had to say this.
Yeah. Well, this particular diagram, we went with an article I wrote about higher dimensions, because basically I was trying to explain how each dimension works. A lot of people out there talking about the fourth and fifth dimensions now, but they don't do anything about what they really mean. So I did a number of blogs on my website about what it's like to go to fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth dimensions. I think I got as far as the eighth in my explanation of the physics of how they work and how each one works. And that was what Illustrator was about. This was about using the illustrations of actually space-time and higher dimensions, basically.
And we've got Schrodinger's cat as well.
That's right. And this one I was explaining the fifth dimension, I believe.
Crikey.
So yeah, those blogs are on my website. I've written all about those
and
dimensions.
The website is again?
AzizShamanism.com.
Okay, do mention that often. Okay,
yep.
we'll go on.
Okay. Now, what was this one about? Oh yeah, again, these are images I use for my blogs. This is about brain power, basically. How we know our minds can connect to the whole universe and what we can do with them. And how
but we have two hemispheres. That's important that we have two hemispheres?
Oh yeah.
Does that have a function? I mean, it obviously does, but what function does it have?
Well, as I mentioned in my work in healing through the DNA, the corpus callosum, which is what joins the two hemispheres together, is the shape of a Mobius strip, and it's where the kind of phase change happens from one hemisphere to the other. That's really secret itself, and how we actually store information in our bodies and in our DNA, how thoughts shift from one side to the other, how they change, how we change from memory to future and so on into creativity. It's all really complex the way these hemispheres work to actually create our understanding of past, present, future, and memory and creation and vision and intention and so on.
And what's this left brain, right brain? Women are left brain, or is it men left brain? And what's the reason why that's important when we use those terms? Oh, you're very left brain, or you're very right brain.
Well, we need both, because obviously the left brain is when we're being logical, the right brain is when we're being creative and intuitive, and we make connections to the right brain that are different from logical connections. So rather than we work with an analogy. The right brain seeing things in terms of analogy rather than logic. Like, for instance, when people look at, say, the moon and link it to the water and the feminine and yin and so on, it's like, well, there's no logical connection between those things. That's analogy. But the right brain makes those connections. Left brain doesn't. Left brain works logically. But we need both sides in different ways to actually solve our problems. We need logic, we need intuition, we need creativity. But also it's like about understanding things like poetry and rhythm. These use both sides. In poetry, for instance, you've got the rhythm of the right brain and the logical words of the left brain, and they combine. So, although the two sides have different functions, obviously we have to work them together in different patterns, different ways to actually get things done. For problem solving and for creativity and vision and expanding, looking at solving our future.
But there was something about the BBC when they're hiring staff. They needed people who would be left brain, but they didn't like anybody who could logically think and follow patterns, and therefore they didn't get any engineers. They couldn't hire any engineers because they need to sort things out.
Well, that's silly then. You need logical people to do that, don't you? Yeah. It's a strange idea, really, because we need both sides of the brain. Right. That was from my article on codems, which are the spiritual helpers. One of the things to actually work within the Javanese Magick, I give people what we call codems, which is almost like an angelic guardian. Codem is like a personal angel, rather than angels are actually more universal beings. So you don't really have an angel watching over you personally. You have a codem, which is your individualized angel that's watching you. So these actually help our spiritual development, to give us protection, guidance, and so on, and actually protect us from all kinds of negative forces. So part of the Javanese Magick is to attach people to codems, give them the codem to protect them. And so that's what that one was about.
And this looks like something that's been injected into us, is that right?
Yep, that's sort of looking at the nanotechnology in the blood. How it works. Obviously I pointed out that during the COVID vaccines particularly, there was nanotechnology being introduced to our blood through that.
That's graphic.
Yeah.
Here's Shutterstock, is that right?
It is, yeah. Find some good images on there sometimes, yeah. Okay, this was actually a painting I got when I was first time I was in Peru in the Amazon jungle. That was my teacher, Don Agustin, and he was a good artist and would paint from his visions on the ayahuasca.
And he's smoking it. That's a very complex. You can see. You can see Is it the? It's not the. There's a lion in there. It's not the lion. It's
that's
the
what the
puma.
spirits of the wind. Yeah, it's like he's smoking his pipe and doing his healing there, and he's calling all the spirits in. They use the pipe and the tobacco to actually call the spirits in.
There's an awful lot in that painting.
Oh yeah, very, very shamanic art. Yeah, that's the Sri Yantra, which is the symbol I use to actually, which almost represents the divine blueprint. It helps us to restore our natural vibration when it's been distorted. It's what reminds us of how we ought to be before the distortion happened. It helps correct the DNA, helps overcome all the damage. So this is one of the main healing tools I use. The resonance of that one, when you've done the right kind of activation, the right sadhana to bring its power in, is a very powerful healing tool. We use this one to correct the DNA and actually restore all the pump function to all the damage that's been done.
It looks as it almost would be in some temples.
It would have been, yes. It's one of the common symbols in Hindu temples. Shri simply means auspicious. It's the auspicious symbol.
And then I think we've got this. I think
There
we're
you go,
almost
the
only.
Chandali again, and the fire dragon about the racing the Kundalini of the fire.
It looks fascinating, that.
Yeah, it's all about the Kundalini.
And then
That's
this.
really okay. That's when I was looking at how we deal with the mind control, basically.
Well, this is what they want to do with us: get rid of our mobile phones, and we'd be wearing these headsets.
Well, but I want to put little chips into your brain so you can control without having to wear anything. That's what they're trying to do. But what I was writing in this article, when I used this picture for, was about how the brain can be used to actually reject all this technology and how it can actually reverse it all.
Well, is a whole subject in itself.
Yeah.
And the beautiful tiger.
Yeah, that goes with my course on Take Back Your Power. It's a free course somebody can download, because so many different ways we lose power to people, authorities, and so on. And I went through them on this course and teach people how to take the power back. It's a very good starting point for many people, because when your powers are taken away, you can't really function. And things usually begin by taking your power back.
But that is probably one of the most important things people can get across.
Exactly. So I put that as a free course, somebody can download it, and it can be a life changer. And then my ultimate healing course, where I take it further, this is where I teach people the full technology of how to release those memories from the DNA to heal the really serious conditions and reawaken the body's ability.
Are those little dots?
Dragons, yeah.
Are they?
They represent the points that we work on, like acupuncture points, but not quite the same. We have a different set of points for this work. They're kind of reflex points which trigger the release of genetic memories.
Excellent. And is this what's this? This is.
The left one is when I was in Haiti. It's a little voodoo group. We were in the big pot. We were preparing the herbs for the spells. That's the little room is called the peristyle. It's like a flat roof, but over like it's open around you. Know, it's just an earth ground, and we do the dances and things in there. That's where we do the voodoo. And then on the right picture, it's me back at home showing how people how to create the patterns on the earth. How we draw the symbols on the ground. We call the spirits in.
And then this dude, Voodoo.
Oh, that's yeah. Gede or sometimes on Baron Samedi, which seems to mean Saturday because that's his day, but actually he's the god of death, ruled the ancestors and so on. He's actually quite a fun guy. He looks very serious in this picture, but actually when you meet him, he's very fun. He's crude and very humorous, but he's quite a fun guy to talk to.
So he's wearing a lot of makeup, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah, well, obviously that because he's supposed to be a skeleton, because he's god of death.
And is he a bloke that walks about? Is it in New Zealand, New Orleans, somewhere?
Also Haiti, that's where you do the voodoo. He's one of the spirits. I mean, obviously, they're painting themselves to look like him when they work with him, but he's he's one of the spirits.
Well, this is the main key about the Basis project is that somebody at the end of World War II, some British scientists, intelligence people, found a German spirit making strange-looking humans. And that goes back to the whole mess we're into right now, and are certainly pursuing that agenda now in 2025. And you're providing
Yeah,
solutions to that.
exactly.
Well, that is absolutely a very important point to leave on.
It
So
is, and
it's
it's
really good
this
to meet you and your friend who is in Glastonbury.
Siddhika. Yep.
And we're just calling ourselves Anon for the
Okay.
purposes of this recording. Seems to be a very
Okay.
common name amongst some people, Anon.
Yeah, it is not.
And really, it was fantastic. This is really important because this is the mix of the physics and the belief systems and all of how that relates with each other. And you're providing solutions. That's really what people
Exactly.
need.
That's the important thing. We need solutions to this kind of threats in the world these days, just trying to mess up the whole humanity. We all need this now.
And you have the ability to break their control and how
Exactly.
that's.
We can do that. Yep. And you can all
Well,
learn to do that.
I'm going to wind it up now, and I'm going to say it's a morning here
Okay.
in where is it in Devizes here, not too
Okay.
far from a place where there's Stonehenge and Avebury,
Right.
and
Okay.
you're welcome here. Do you come to the UK at all often, or?
I haven't for a few years now. I mean, we moved here about 5 years ago. We got here and then got locked down, and we've stayed ever since.
Well, the way things are going in this country, I think you're in the right place.
Well, I never would aspire to go back with all that's going on there.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much indeed, and we'll hopefully do more details. If you pick a particular subject and hit that really in detail
Okay. We'll
later
do
on
that, yeah.
on Basis 158, and it's a great to see you, and thanks very
Right.
much.
Thank you. Pleasure to speak to you.